left. So unlike Ben, I really didn't have much of an experience with the whole Maccabiah program. The JCC Maccabiah doesn't have a karate competition, as much as I've tried to push and prod and ask and beg and plead. However, it was before nationals, about 2 years ago, that actually, I think with my mother, was on the USA Karate website, where they were advertising for tryouts, trying to get athletes to come down and try out for this new competition that the USA Karate organization had never really heard of before. After finding out about this, my mom told me about it, and being the token Jew of my dojo, I decided, with my sensei's permission, with my sensei's help, to get ready and prepare for the games. And I wasn't really sure what to expect. I wasn't really sure what to prepare for, who to prepare for, what kind of countries were good, what weren't. And even my sensei, who has many, many years of Pan American world champion experience, couldn't tell me how to prepare for something that he had never heard of. So fast forward a few months, now we have a tryout, to which I think that I traveled the furthest for. It's this really far off place called West Palm Beach. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it.
North Miami Beach.
I knew it was a beach.
Michael and Russell.
Either way, I think I traveled the furthest out of everybody, excluding the people from California. It was really a surreal experience. I had never really tried out for any national team before, and it was a small group. There weren't really too many karate Jews that really came down, which these next upcoming games are trying to promote it more, try to promote it earlier with the USA Karate Federation. Actually, once we got back, the USA Karate Federation said that they would actually try to expand funding to get more kids to come into the Maccabiah games and join this Maccabiah program. So I tried out, I don't know how I did. I figured I came in about second. We didn't give out medals. It was just an overall observation. The tryouts were probably the most stressful time I had up until the actual games themselves. We spent the entire weekend down in North Miami Beach, and we stayed in the hotel. The night before, we had a rules seminar with one of the head referees of the United States for the USA Karate Federation, and for the first time, it kind of hit me that I wasn't doing something that I'd ever done before, and that I was going to do something a little bit bigger than myself, and not really representing myself and my dojo, but rather my country, where we had the U.S. flag everywhere and past Maccabiah flags everywhere. It was almost surreal in a sense, kind of once it starts hitting you, what happened. So the weeks go by, and I connected on Facebook with a couple of the other kids who tried out. We all became very close friends, very close-knit group, especially with the younger ones, the juniors. We all got each other's numbers. We still talk. I talk to 5 of them pretty much on a daily basis. And once I kind of heard that people were starting to get their acceptance letters and mine hadn't really come yet, I kind of started getting concerned about maybe I didn't make the team, maybe I didn't do good enough. I started nitpicking. I started watching the videos, started getting my performances. I was like, oh, I did this wrong. Oh, I did that wrong. And it really it kind of took away from the whole experience. I kind of started becoming selfish. It's like, oh, why did they pick me? Why was I not good enough? But once the acceptance letter did come in the mail, and I was, as you saw, selected by the Maccabiah chair, I kind of felt bad that I had gone against this organization that was trying to do good and trying to actually help and expand this Jewish community that many of us have grown up in, and trying to unite people through sports. So obviously, same thing with Ben, once we got the letter, the issue was funding. And thanks to everybody who really donated and helped me and were the reasons that I got to the games, I was able to leave last summer and go to the Maccabiah games in Israel. When I got to the airport, really, really early. Probably waking up for a teenager is the hardest thing in the morning. And getting me to go to the airport was probably a joy for my mother. Once I saw Ben, things kind of calmed down. So Ben and I met up at the airport. We knew each other obviously through the temple, but we really didn't know each other. So we kind of started talking. So I got to know Ben a little bit more. It was a lot of fun. We spent about an hour and a half just talking about our sports, what we do, what kind of levels we are in our sports, and what different competitions are like, just sharing stories. And once we got on the plane, Ben obviously has his own plane experiences, but I had my own row. There were so few people on the plane that it was just Ben's row that actually
Just the flight from here to New York.
Yeah, I had my own row.
I think he did too. It was the flight to Israel that he was.
I don't know. It was one of the two that, yeah, but yeah, I think both of us did. I think Ben and I were sitting. It was so small that we ended up sitting next to each other. And then we said, "Oh, you guys can spread out if you want." We just different ends of the plane, kind of like, all right, I'm just gonna lounge out over here, kind of thing, and expand myself as much as possible. And I don't remember much of the flight to New York. I mean, my islands probably do. But once I got to New York, I met up with this one girl who played table tennis. And yes, it's called table tennis, not ping pong, as I learned the hard way. They're very, very picky about that.
She smack you?
Yes. Then I kind of started talking with her. She was from San Diego, California, and why she had flown to New York, I don't know, considering I believe there were flights coming out of California. But it was kind of nice to meet someone who I didn't know, and it was the first experience I had. As soon as I got to the airport, I got to meet somebody who was also Jewish and was also an athlete and was 16 as the same way that I was at the time. And it was really, that was kind of another kind of clicking point, that it felt kind of weird that I'm no longer Daniel Klahr of South Florida, I'm Daniel Klahr of the United States. And so as I met more and more people, there was a group of about 5 of us. There was the girl who played table tennis, there was a fencer, 2 badminton players who I think were on the same team, and then there was myself. And we all kind of traveled around our own pack, and once we got on the plane, I kind of met with all the karate kids, and knowing all of us, we started kind of joking and picking on each other and doing the karate thing, and may have gotten in trouble with the TSA a little bit. They don't really appreciate kids beating each other up like karate kids do. But once we got on the flight, there really wasn't much to do. I sat next to a golfer who this was his 6th Maccabiah Games. So I sat next to one of the, I guess they called it Masters Golf. And I sat next to a tennis player who this was his 2nd games. So I had a little bit of experience during the flight out. And the entire time, I don't think I slept at all on the flight out. I'm sure if any of you guys have gone to Israel, you know how long this flight is. It was a joy to stay awake for all 13 hours. And it was a joy to keep the 2 people next to me awake for all 13 hours. I was just asking them questions, like, hey, what's this like? What am I going to do when I get here? How do I find my bags? What hotel do I go to? How's the weather? You know, just kind of random stuff. And once we kind of landed in Israel, I saw Ben for about 5 minutes, and then we just got separated. I found all the karate kids, we all got our bags, we all met up with everybody else from the karate delegation in Ben Gurion. And looking around, I did not expect what I saw. There were flags, there were banners, there were welcomed athletes from around the world. There was such fanfare that I didn't expect, that I was in shock, kind of, that I didn't think that this was such a big deal. I just thought it was just another karate competition. But by far was it the most glamorous thing that I've ever seen, in a sense of just karate competition and just any kind of gathering at all. It was just, there was so much fanfare going on. I almost didn't, I was taking pictures left and right. I have about 600 pictures of just the airport. Once we got back to the hotel, we kind of got into our rooms. Fortunately, I had my bags. I did not pick up anybody else's bags. When we got up to our room, the first night we kind of didn't do anything. It was kind of like, you know, just kind of walk around, meet the people around you, meet some of the other guys. And the first group of people, we were in 2 different rooms. One was for the Israel Connect Tour, and then another one was for the actual games themselves. So the first group, I had another 2 table tennis, actually had 3 table tennis competitors and myself. So making ping pong jokes all day was not really appreciated. And the schedules were kind of weird, but once you got used to it, we kind of all became more, not just athletes, we became kind of a family. It's like, oh, Gal, when are you going to be here? Oh, when are you going to be there? Oh, I think I'm going to have lunch. You want to come with me? We went out of our way to kind of meet each other. And the second night we were there, and I think it was the second night, we kind of had, we had this like floor party where everybody on the 3rd floor at Chef Ayin, we all got together, we all kind of came out. Ben was there. That's when he met a lot of his fencing friends and some of his volleyball friends. That's when he met quite a few of them, actually. I'm sure his mother is proud. But I
know what happens at Maccabi stays in the time.
Hey,
That's right.
but yeah, I didn't think so. But I was kind of walking. I hung out with Ben a little bit, but Ben's crowd really wasn't my crowd. It took a while for me to kind of fit in. I was trying to find the karate people. The karate people were spread out all over. We weren't really in one area, so I didn't see much of the karate kids. The one karate kid, his name was Joey, who I remember until the day I die. He had the most character in anybody that I've ever seen. He was the loudest, most hyper individual that you could possibly imagine. He was over with this door, and he was talking to this girl. And this girl had her leg all the way up on the door frame, just straight up, and her legs were 180 degrees. And I kind of looked at her, and I was like, what is going on here? Because I'd never seen anybody so flexible before. And so Joey was like, oh, these are part of the gymnast organization. These are rhythmic gymnasts. And I was like, rhythmic gymnastics? What is this? So I really had never heard of rhythmic gymnastics. And that night, another one of the karate kids named Scotty also met some of the other rhythmic gymnasts. And and the gymnasts allowed us to play with some of their toys, as I like to call them, with all the ribbons and the pins and the balls. We just kind of started playing with all the toys. There's a video of a 6'5", bulked up karate kid playing with little rhythmic gymnastic ribbons and prancing around. I have about 6
That's how it all
videos
starts, you know.
So,
A suitcase, with toys.
nobody really saw that. It was kind of one of a karate kind of rhythmic things that kind of kept secret from everybody. It was kind of fun. Once we kind of started getting settled at Chef and once we started actually going on the tours, we found out that rhythmic gymnastics and karate were going to be together the entire time. So every time we got on a bus, it was rhythmic gymnastics and karate. And yes, this 6-foot Scotty, he actually never lived down that night. And so every time we went out, the first place we did go was Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv, obviously, if you guys have ever seen pictures or been there yourselves, it's breathtaking. The beaches are just amazing. And we walked around, we toured around a little bit. I had been to Israel the year before, so I knew what to expect when it came to the actual touring of Israel experience. But when it comes to the Maccabi games, people are so into it, you become almost a celebrity. I was wearing a USA, not even a USA shirt, it was a USA karate shirt. Wasn't part of the Maccabi games. Somebody came up to me and asked me who I was, where I was from, and if I was part of the Maccabi games. So we became the center of attention no matter where we went. And in a busy city like Tel Aviv, we clogged up a couple sidewalks. Then after Tel Aviv, I don't exactly remember the exact order of the places that we went. Masada, we did not walk up, we took the cable car up because even though we are karate kids, we are little wimps in the morning. And yes, the place is in ruins. So we also, the same day we went to Masada, we went to the Dead Sea. Unfortunately, I couldn't go into the Dead Sea. I had a couple cuts that I was advised not to go in with. But I did get a couple of pictures. I did take pictures of everybody. I became kind of the team photographer of sorts. The reputation that sticks with me even to today when people are asking me for pictures every now and then. Seeing the people at the Dead Sea, it was an interesting experience because you had all these different sports and all these big, burly athletes, all these men playing around like they're 5 years old in mud. It was something that I really hadn't seen before. I don't know if you saw, there was, someone had drawn on himself the USA with a Jewish star. There were all different sorts of designs, some a little bit more appropriate than others that I have pictures of. They didn't make the final cut in the video. But it was an interesting experience. The Dead Sea was probably the most fun that we had as a group. There was a whole beach party, there was a DJ that was invited, there was a whole bunch of Israeli music going on. But when it came to the more serious aspects of coming to Israel, we are here for a reason. And a lot of this reason is, even the motto of the Maccabiah organization is bringing Jewish pride through sports. And that's one thing that I really wanted to emphasize while I was there. And going to places like the soldiers' graveyard and to Yad Vashem, it was really an experience, and even now as I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it again, having family that's in the Israeli army, my stepsister who's serving in the Israeli army right now, and she was at the time still, it was a very surreal experience. I was almost looking at some of these ages of some of the kids. There are 13-year-olds who are buried at this graveyard, and I'm 7, and I was 16 at the time, looking at a 13-year-old's grave who had done so much for his country that it was almost weird to kind of, I didn't want their names to go in vain in a sense, and it was almost a new enlightening that a lot of people won't admit to. A lot of people were like, "Oh, I didn't cry at all," but it was very touching. It was a very sad experience. Yad Vashem also was very tough to go through. A lot of people were unable to make it all the way through. It was really tough to go through that part of Israel, but it was very important that all of us experienced it in a timely fashion, in a sense. However, once the games kind of started, opening ceremonies is all a blur. I don't remember anything of opening ceremonies, probably for the better. But I do remember that I went with a red T-shirt, my full sweatsuit, and a hat, and I came back with an Australian hat, a Chilean shirt, and someone else's pants that I don't know how I got that off of them. So I was representing a whole lot of countries outside of the United States. Once the games kind of started, things settled down a lot. We all kind of heard about Ben and what Ben had accomplished. Everybody kind of surrounded Ben and swarmed Ben every time they saw him. I never really got to see him as often as I would have liked, because obviously being in 2 different sports, we had 2 different schedules. Once it kind of got to the karate competition, that's when it kind of started hitting me that I'm not a visitor to Israel. I'm a competitor, and I'm representing my country. And I felt almost proud not only to be Jewish, but to be an American. And it's a sense that a lot of these Olympians feel when they go to the Olympics. I felt almost the same experience. And to compete, obviously, didn't come back with the same hardware that Ben did. Unfortunately, things happen. Very tough competition. This is the highest level competition that I had ever experienced as an athlete before. And it was that good of competition. I took Israel in the first round. I lost to Israel in the first round. And my second round was actually pretty interesting, because when I was going for 3rd place, I went against this little short kid, about this tall, from Cuba. This was the first Cuban delegation, I believe, to ever have gone to the Maccabiah Games. And so I had the honor and the privilege to actually compete against one of the first Cubans to compete in the games, and almost made history in a sense about just coming together as a global community, as a Jewish community, and just seeing all these different people from all these different countries, especially those from Uganda, we had from Azerbaijan. It was such a weird experience to see, and it became almost a turf war in a sense. The competition, especially with karate, got very competitive. But at the end of the day, we all kind of came together. We had these opening ceremonies, and it was very nice. Music was playing. All the countries who were in the karate competition stood up and were lined up. And it was almost an interesting experience in the sense that while I have had some international experience with international competitors coming to the United States, I was a visitor in another person's country. And I was aiming out to beat someone on their home turf. And I kind of felt good about that. So after the game, after I had my events, I didn't win. I don't have a medal to come home with, but that's not really the purpose of it. I was the first, as some of you guys know, I do have some setbacks and some disorders and disabilities in my life that, I have to deal with on an everyday basis, but I get by. One of them of note would be osteogenesis imperfecta, also known as brittle bone disease. I don't know, probably all of you guys at one point or another have seen me in a cast, and me walking around, hobblong over here, kind of, working his way through the temple, through services. And while I didn't get hurt at the games, I was the first ambulatory competitor who has this disease, which means that I was the first person with OI to compete without a wheelchair and to compete on his own without the use of any assistive devices. And I didn't know this at the time. I thought that I was getting all these phone calls because they thought that I was kind of cool, But I had interview after interview after interview asking about these disabilities that I really didn't want to talk about. But when I got the notice about meeting the president of Israel, it kind of hit me that I had something going for me that not a lot of people have. And when I got in the car to meet the president of Israel, there was this really tall person who was in the seat next to me, who I had never seen before. I didn't know who he was. He said he was a swimmer. He had competed in the Olympics. I thought Michael Phelps, but Michael Phelps isn't Jewish. Unfortunately, because that would have been just a great show to watch. He was Garrett Weber Gale. And while I had personally never seen him compete, I had heard stories about him. I had heard stories about him being at the games. He was the flag bearer in opening ceremonies for us. I don't know if you guys saw from the picture. He was a really tall one. It was kind of hard to miss him. But he was very nice. I got to ask a lot about what it was like to be in the Olympics. He says the Maccabiah Games are the closest thing to the Olympics that he had ever competed in. And he tries to compete and coach every single opportunity he can in a sense of giving back. Because just like a lot of these other kids, this was his first experience with Judaism. And this was his upbringing in Judaism. This was the light that went off in his head in a sense. And just talking to somebody who's so Olympic, like literally Olympian, just talking to him about his experiences and realizing that he's human too. And that we all have these different experiences was kind of interesting. So we get to the president's house, and I see food, and I see food, I eat it. And so I'm talking to a lot of these people who I didn't know who they are. I learned afterwards that I'm talking to dignitaries and heads of organizations that were multi-billion-dollar companies that I was just conversing with like they were just regular people. So we get into the president's house, and I was told, all right, sit in the front row. I was like, okay, sit in the front row. There's an open seat there, an open seat there, an open seat there. It's like, okay, I'll sit in the very front row. So there's this girl sitting there, and she's kind of quiet. She's talking to herself. I think she was on her phone or something. And I sat down next to her, and I just kind of started talking to her. And I was talking to her. I didn't really know who she was. I didn't recognize her from anything. And then I turned and talked to Garrett Weber Gale again, and then he ignored me for the first time since I got in the car and said, "Hi, Allie." And I had just realized that I had ignored and kind of thought she was kind of weird. I kind of thought Allie Raisman was kind of antisocial. So that was my first experience with meeting Allie Raisman, the gold medal Olympian. It was an interesting experience. I didn't get to talk to her very much. I didn't get the picture. She was very nice. She's just like a regular person. She tries to give back as much as possible. Obviously, you know her experiences with the JCC Maccabi Games. She was one who lit the torch at the opening ceremonies. So meeting all these very high up people and being treated like one of these high up people, it gave me a reason to come back with something. And on this flight back to Israel, I really had a lot of thinking to do, none of which got done, but a lot of thinking to do. With what am I going to do with all this experience and all this information once I got back? And this hasn't been disclosed to anybody yet, but as I go to college and as I develop and as I grow up, I want to kind of stick with karate. And I've now become a judge for the USA National Karate Federation. And my goal eventually, once I get higher up in the ranks, is to judge and help referee and officiate one of the Maccabi Games in the future. So the goal of the Maccabi Games is to give back, and I want to give back in probably the closest way possible in being a judge and fixing a lot of what happened in Israel for the better, to try to make the experience even better for these karate athletes that I had the same experience with. I can empathize, I can sympathize. I know what these kids went through, and so I can help them with their experience and lead them along and help them learn what it's like to be truly a representative of both your country and your religion.